Hello and welcome back to a series of podcasts on Eric Hutchinson's Sounds Like This as we celebrate the 15th anniversary of his first full-length record. My name is James. That's Eric. How are you, sir?
Raise the roof.
Indeed.
I think that was not something we were saying in 2008.
No, it was passé then.
Yeah.
We would like to thank Hyperballad Studios again for having us. It's a gorgeous little space here in Brooklyn, New York. We're on to You Don't Have to Believe Me. You don't have to believe me.
You don't have to believe me.
Yeah, so these titles are great. The first two, it's very open, like very conversational. Okay, it's all right with me. You don't have to believe me. All right, so this is what I wrote about this. Wonderful rhythm and blues song. It has horn blasts. Before I continue, this is a horn section.
Yes.
Can you tell me, I don't know if you remember the gentleman's name or if you even...
I wanted to make sure I knew who was here.
What is this all, like a trumpet, saxophone, trombone?
It sounds like a saxophone and trumpet if I had to guess here. I've got the liner notes, which will be available in the vinyl printing here.
Yes.
And I am now... It looks like Paul Pate was playing saxophone.
Okay.
And... I can't find a trumpet player on here. So maybe it was all saxophones.
What? Yeah?
Maybe it was a brana and it had a baritone.
Oh, maybe he played two different Yeah,
That's
okay.
possible. That
Yeah.
seems like something, because it doesn't sound like there's a lot of trumpet in there. So Paul Pate's playing the saxophone, and we recorded this song in New Monkey Studios in California, Van Nuys.
And very much, in the old Stax style of building a song off the ba-na, I love that. Was that in your head when you wrote it? Did you want a horn section to do that? Because Prince made very famous in the 80s the idea of using keyboards to substitute for that. But then people started to get back in the 90s to get back to using real brass again. Was that your idea?
I liked the idea of brass. There's a lot of brass on this record. And
there is, yeah.
But there is some electric keyboard stuff as well. I was trying to meld them a little bit together, and Prince was another huge influence on me at this time. I was definitely listening to a lot of early Prince records.
You don't have to believe me, I'm just speaking my mind. You look love as always, get that all the time. You don't have to believe me, when I tell you that I'm impressed, but you sure better believe me when I say you deserve the best. Come on.
And yeah, this song was just kind of that's another example of it was a funk song, but not made by a band. It was a solo funk song. So it's crafted around it, but funk is all about people together holding a groove together. And this was piecemealed funk.
Right, which is what Prince did. Because he recorded everything himself, so but it harkens back. I didn't even mean to get off on the Prince tangent, because what Prince was trying to do he was trying to create without bringing in horn sections. Later on, he had horns all over the joint on his stuff, but it's the idea of building a song around that riff, and that was in your head before you went into the studio. You wanted horns to play that part.
Yeah, I think so. And there's horns on Rock and Roll. It hasn't been long enough. Maybe one other one. But yeah.
Really prevalent here, though, I think.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe me, I'm not gonna lie. I've seen all the attention get from other guys. You don't have to believe me when they tell you I like your dress. But you sure better believe me when I say you deserve respect.
Did you play all the keyboards on this record?
Not on the whole record. I played some. Some of the keyboards were played by Will Golden, who was the producer and was really great while we were making the record. And then the rest of the keyboards were played by Darren Johnson, who was a guy that I met that was brought in to play keyboards, and he was in Miles Davis's last band.
Oh, wow.
And I was very excited about that. It was very 90s funk. It was out there, kind of Miles Davis stuff, but he had been in, that was kind of the thing that they pitched me on. I was like, I'm listening.
Yeah.
So he's playing on there too.
That's cool. And it's always great to get the flavor of the music that you're playing because there isn't, I know you have a song called Rock and Roll, but there isn't a lot of rock and roll on this record. It's a very soul, funk style. You're a white kid, you're playing this. Yes, please, go ahead.
Dave Yaden also played some clavinet on this record.
Oh, we're going to talk about clavinet, my friend.
That's it. I didn't
yeah,
want to leave out Dave Yaden.
It's quite, yeah, we're going to get there, because again, I use the term, it's quite prevalent in some of these recordings.
But yeah, it's not a rock and roll album. I was actively trying not to. I was trying to go against what a lot of the people thought my record should just sound like, based on what I sounded like solo. You know, I'd done a lot of demos with producers where it's just a drum kit and a B3 organ and electric guitar and just kind of filling it out like a rock band would. And I was very much like, I want it to be a little left of center. I want it to be a little quirkier and use instruments that maybe you don't hear as much.
Yeah, I could not even imagine this as a traditional singer-songwriter record.
It feels like no fire's on your side, no access to your pride. You gotta learn to take control. Your body is a temple soul. You gotta trust in me, and your mind is what's at stake. So before we build this love, please believe that you're good enough.
So I thought I heard Hammond B3 in this song. There's not any Hammond, because you said no Hammond B3.
There's very little Hammond in this record, but this song has the
Like a setting on one of the...
Farfisa.
Farfisa.
It's a Farfisa.
No kidding.
Which was, I mean, that's like an old 60s thing, but I learned about it. Elvis Costello, who's one of my favorites, he used a lot of Farfisa, and I was like, this will kind of create the same world. It gives us an idea. You can do pads and things, but it's more of like an attacky thing. B3s are more like mellow, man.
Right. That's
so, yeah, there's some Farfisa on here. There's some digital keyboards.
Moog. Did you use a Moog on here? Not
Maybe.
this record. Oh, maybe. Okay.
Maybe.
So you built that into the studio. Like you're let's put Moog. You guys are building these songs like you would build a house. Okay.
Yes. That's the only way I knew how to do it back then.
Right.
I didn't have the confidence or the know-how to be like, I'm going to put a whole band in the studio and we'll just play it.
We'll just play it, which is
sound
what you
good.
do now. Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe me, I'm not off the road. They've been taking advantage and it's gone on slow. You don't have to believe me when we're dancing out on the floor. You sure better believe me when I say you are worth much more.
So I do hear Michael Jackson phrasing. We talked about it in the last podcast.
Definitely on this song, yeah.
And you mentioned James Brown, but I put in here, Jackson learned the most, according to Michael Jackson, from Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson, the great soul singer, who influenced everyone. He sang in a higher register that no one else had done. Everybody, especially African Americans at the time, the black sound, there was a baritone, there was a punch to it. Jackie Wilson came on very almost effeminate and sang as, in fact, there's a joke where everyone kept telling him to change the keys to the song. He's like, don't worry, I got this. And then he came in the studio and like, my love is lifted. He's way up there. But that's like where he starts. And Michael Jackson, of course, with his high voice, being a child singer, and he maintained that voice throughout his career. I hear that in a lot of the phrasing on this record.
I mean, I was really steeped and still love classic 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s soul music. It's still a big part of how I write and what I think about, but I think it was definitely in here. So yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled to hear Jackie Wilson might have made an appearance in this song. But yeah, I hear a lot of Michael Jackson, and it's a high song. And like I'm screaming to get up there.
You
Like
are.
I'm pushing.
I don't want nobody else, and nobody else is gonna treat you the way they ought to, and that's what you deserve. If I could make you see it, so you could truly believe it, so you won't even need it. No, 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 you don't have to believe me. I'll continue on. You still hold the potential. Bad all along. You don't have to believe me. You're shaking what you got, but you sure better believe me when I tell you your mind's what's hot. Come on.
I don't know how I'm going to sing this one live yet.
Yeah.
I haven't tried singing
You
this
wanna
live in a
bring
while.
it down.
You don't have
No,
to
no, you know, the
believe
key
me.
change. Yeah, not that low. That's fantastic. You'd be a crooner now.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, I didn't want this to go by. The ubiquitous siren. I don't know if anyone heard that, but every podcast we've ever done, there's a giant siren out the window. We're in a studio now, so it's a
Easter
little bit more
eggs.
quiet. Have you ever heard of like the flamingos, the contours, the dominoes, those
Of
early?
course.
So they have
love
to be
that.
also at least an influence for a kid growing up in the 90s. It seems odd that you would be steeped in this.
I was odd, and it was odd. I always liked older music, and the older I get, the older the music gets. But I love classical music, yes, but I love doo-wop from the 50s and
Like the
classic
Ink
rock
Spots
and roll.
and
Yeah, classic rock and roll, Chuck Berry, and sort of the real foundation of like what the rock and roll movement was, pre-Beatles,
Yeah, well, pre-British invasion, of course. But for me, I grew up in the 70s, and I had to find this stuff. Like, I got introduced to Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters through the Rolling Stones.
Right.
For somebody like you growing up, where do you get introduced to Chuck Berry? Where do you get introduced to Jackie
My
Wilson?
parents were into it. We had a random cassette tape that was a documentary that was made that was about the early days of rock and roll, and it was Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino,
Jerry
probably
Lee.
Buddy Holly,
Yeah.
Jerry Lee Lewis. And I used to watch it a lot, and it made a real point of saying, like, here's Little Richard doing the song, and here's Pat Boone doing the same song, and, like, which one sounds better? But also, I grew up in a CD era that you didn't really, so I think a lot of stuff was reissued, and I was able to get into a lot of, like, Atlantic Records, doo-wop greatest hits CDs
Sure,
that were
sure.
out and things like that. And there was a couple radio stations in Washington, D.C. that would play that stuff. But, yeah, I just loved it from the beginning, and it's so... we had a doo-wop group come and perform at our wedding during the cocktail hour. I found they were singing on the subway, and I said, "Do you guys do weddings?" And they said, "We could do a wedding." So they came and just like performed there, and it was
that's great.
awesome. And I just love the immediacy. I'm a real sucker still. If I see a doo-wop group on the subway, I'm just like, take my money. Like, I love the immediacy of it. It's just people, and I kind of got into this a little bit with my most recent records, Sing Along with Eric Hutchinson, but like the immediacy of like we just have our voices in our mouths, and
Sure.
it's so simple, but like there's so much can come out of that.
And finally, as far as quite literally finally, because in the coda, you do a lot of ad-libbing, you know, and you repeat which I think is great too, you repeat the title, "You don't have to believe me." You're like doing all these great... Did you do that? Did you again compose that? Or is that just you on the fly and you took the best takes of that? How did you do that?
I think at that point I was definitely comping stuff, so that usually, yeah, you'll go in and sing.
You want to explain comping?
Yeah, you'll sing 10 takes and then go back and sit there and edit, okay, this line from there and then this little part from this. And if you Frankenstein a full take, which is how most pop music gets made.
Well, especially now, but there wasn't really... Did you have stems then? Do you have
We did have
computer stems?
Yes, we were able to, yes, we were
So you didn't
using
have to
Pro
cut the
Tools and
tape.
stuff. So
Yeah.
yes, we were doing, it was much easier.
Don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe me.
So yeah, that stuff these are probably the best versions of all the takes that I did.
Is there something about... I didn't write any of the lyrics down because I really wanted to talk to you about the style and the sound you were going for here, which I think you achieved, probably as well as anything else on this record. Is there something about this song that I'm missing or an audience is missing that you're revealing? Because we'll get into it. There are more songs where you're very, very open about yourself, about the way you were. We talked about, okay, it's all right with me. You know, you're having this relationship, or you knew that it was...
Well, this song was written about the
Same
same
woman?
Bernadette from Okay, It's All Right With Me. This is like a pump-up song. It was like, you're awesome. And it was like also though, like I was talking about like, I was looking for upbeat songs to play, and I wanted songs that were funky, and this song kind of came out of that, but this was a song of like, I think you're amazing.
And you might not believe this.
Yeah, and
but-
maybe, maybe you have a hard time believing it, but you don't have to believe me.
Right? Of course she doesn't have to. Very good. Well, you're way ahead of your time with that one. You know, you let the woman decide whether she can believe you or not, which I like that. Very good. That's Eric. I'm James. This is the podcast for Sounds Like This, the 15th anniversary. There's going to be a vinyl release. There's going to be a tour. I don't know when these are coming out, but
We got shirts.
you got
people.
shirts. Check out the shirt right there. Yes, very good. You want to give that a So we get a nice shot. There you go.
Shirts, people.
Oh, I love that. We should talk about the cover of that record. We'll talk about it in another podcast. But anyway, that's it for the second track. You don't have to believe me. I'm James. That's Eric. Let's go on to song number 3.